In all your years, was there a call or two where you just were like, I want that one back?
I mean, I will tell you one that jumps to my mind that ties right into this conversation.
Well, quite a weekend over at Lumen Field. Quite a reaction from a lot of the Cougs out there, rightfully so. Washington State earned that win. This is Dawg Talk with Brock. This is, I think, show number 3 of this season. Gonna be a fun one. Chris Petersen's going to join the show. We're going to talk about what was, what is to come, what we learned, all that fun stuff with the coach here in just a few minutes. But as I'll try to do every single week, what I learned, what I know, what I think. What I learned, what I know, what I think. It's kind of like in a football play where you got your formation, your personnel grouping, your formation, and your play, right? So same thing here. What I learned, what I know, what I think. What I learned is that this team can be unbelievably undisciplined. And by this team, I mean this 2024 version of the University of Washington. Should that be terribly surprising to me or anybody? Probably not. But 16 penalties for 135 yards. I learned that you can be that undisciplined. This is a team that has been a work in progress. This is a team that was very divided in the spring. This is a team that, as I understand it, even in the spring in the locker room, you had kind of cliques of, well, there's the old Arizona guys, and there's some other transfers, and here's the leftovers, and here's the, well, maybe I'm going to go in the portal, maybe I'm not. It was a very divided house in the spring, not surprisingly so, is most houses in college football, especially when a coach leaves and a new coach comes in, and an AD leaves and a new AD comes in, and all of the topsy-turvy nature of it. But they had to bring it together, and I think they spent a lot of the summer doing that, out at fall camp, watching them celebrate together, communicate together, all of the things that they have done on and off of the field to bring this group together, to be disciplined, to be accountable to one another. But I think when some adversity hit, and I knew it was going to hit, this was going to be the toughest opponent of this month. You knew it was coming, but what I learned is, unfortunately, you could commit those kind of self-inflicted, selfish, undisciplined penalties. And 16 penalties, man, I have not seen that for a long, long time. So that's what I learned about them. What I think about them, I think the quarterback is still a really good player. I think Will Rogers has had a tremendous start to the season. I look at Will Rogers and I see one of the best completion percentages in all of college football. I think that he's going to be a really steadying force over the course of this season. I think like Dylan Gabriel, I think like Indiana's quarterback, I think like a lot of these veterans around college football that have played so much, he can be a steadying force. And when I see 77% completions, when I see 6 touchdowns and no interceptions, when I see just 4 sacks through 3 games because he knows where to go with the ball, that is a huge, huge positive, moving it forward. And I think Will Rogers is going to be super, super steady Eddie over the course of the season. What I know is that Northwestern is exactly the team that I think a Jed Fish in Washington will want coming in. Maybe not too different than Purdue was the perfect team for Notre Dame to get themselves right before they get going after a tough loss. And I think for coming off of a rivalry game, all of the emotion, all of the disappointment, all of the struggles of the final play, which I've talked about on our show a bunch, I'm going to get to here with Coach Petersen in a second. I know that Northwestern is the right team to come across the country, as challenged as they are in many of their spots, for the Huskies to, in their case, hopefully get right before the Big Ten slate and 3 of the next 4 out on the road. So those are things that I think, those are things that I learned, those are things that I know. And man, it is my pleasure to bring in the old head coach, who I just get to watch now on Friday nights. I get to see that glorious smile. I get to see the hair perfectly. I get to see the suit and tie that you don't have to pack. I got to pack my own suit and tie when I go to 98-degree Stillwater, Oklahoma this week, Chris. But do I understand, like, you just walk in and there's hair, there's makeup, and there's your suit waiting for you at Fox?
It's taken me a while to get used to it. Not the clothes being laid out. Yeah. The hair and makeup, I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, right? That is a weird component. It was kind of a weird week, Chris. I said I'm just not comfortable calling it the Apple Cup. You know, that was my big rant last week. Like, I get it. It's a rivalry game, but it's not a conference game. It's not in Pullman. It's not in Seattle. Well, it was in Seattle. It was not in Husky Stadium. I had a real hard time trying to come to grips with that game. Did you struggle in any of that way, or did you just know, hey, man, suck it up, Buttercup. This is college football today, and all that tradition and all that history and everything that I still want to hang on to, it's just no longer there.
Yeah, I think the thing that got me the most was how fast the game jumped on us.
Yeah.
When it had, like, you could, in the past, you feel it building all year long. You know that's going to be an interesting matchup. And a few weeks out, the buzz starts. Well, the buzz hadn't started, in my opinion, this year. It just happened. So, yeah, that's probably the only thing. But let me tell you something who thought it was the Apple Cup and wasn't messing around was the Washington State Cougars.
Yeah.
They had no problem going, here we are, bring it.
Yeah. And I think last year, Chris, had to help. I mean, last year against a much more talented Husky team, a team with first-round offensive tackle, second-round offensive tackle, a team with the 8th pick at quarterback, a team with the 10th pick at wide receiver, a team with 3 NFL wide receivers drafted in the first 3 rounds, and that didn't even include Trice and some of the pieces defensively. I think Jake Dickert and those Cougs knew, like, hey, man, we went toe-to-toe with them a season ago in their house. And now we're at Lumen Field with a few more of our people, a few less of their crowd and everything else, and all the emotion that surrounds it for them. They were emotionally in a place that didn't feel like Washington could get to.
100%. I mean, I don't have really much more to add.
You know what? I'll stop talking then. For crying out loud. Well, I do my job.
You're exactly right about the confidence part of things. I mean, that was by far one of the top 2 best teams in the country last year, the Washington Huskies. They go in just a couple games before and give them all they want. And so, as coaches, you can't give the kids confidence. You can't. Confidence comes from demonstrated performance. You can inspire them, you can love them up, you can do all these other things. But you gotta earn it, and you gotta build it in practice, and then you have to go demonstrate it in prime time.
Yeah.
And they did that last year. And so coming back in here, I know there's different players, a lot of different players on both teams, but I know that Cougar program had tremendous confidence, and they just battled to the wire. The other thing is, though, is I want to give the Huskies and Jed Fish credit too. I mean, nobody lost more in the entire country than that Washington program. And so now, you're 1 play away, you're 2 yards away.
Yeah.
And now we're like, oh, these guys, they can't. What are we talking about here? I mean, Jake Dickert, he's got a nice thing going over there in Pullman. He's been there a couple years. He knows his way. They have their identity. And Jed is still building that. And, they were right there in a really competitive, great football game. And so for everybody just is like, that was bad. That wasn't bad. There were some bad parts of it, but that was a heck of a game.
Well, let's talk about the 2 bad that everybody is seemingly focused on, and I started this Dawg Talk with, and that is 16 penalties, Chris. Did you ever coach a team as a head man at anywhere along the way, from your Cal Poly or your UC Davis JV team all the way through your
Yeah, make sure we got the Davis thing right.
UC Davis JV team all the way to the end at Washington, where you left a game with 16 penalties in 60 minutes?
I don't think we had that many. And I will tell you this, as a coach, man, that just can irk you to no end. But with that being said, and I've said this many times, even though I would be all over our team on this penalty things, because those are just sins, self-inflicted negatives, that we can control a lot of those type of things. And so, and the other thing I'm going to say to this, even though I would never tell our team this, there's not a high correlation between penalties and the most penalized teams in the country and winning and losing. Washington last year was one of the most penalized teams in the country, and that didn't slow those guys down a bit. Now, they are momentum killers.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on when the penalty is, if it takes points off the board or keeps the drive alive for the other team and they score, That's why one of my favorite lines is stats are for losers. Like, you have to really look at this stuff and did it really matter? And it seemed like when you have 16 of them, there's going to be a couple in there that do matter.
Yeah. I think along those lines, I may be wrong. They were either first or second. The 2013 Seahawks that won the Super Bowl, they were also either first or second in most penalties. But that was playing on an edge, right? That was playing, through emotion. And this just felt like what you said, so many self-inflicted that came back to bite them. The other conversation is obviously the 4th and 2. So before we dig into some of the scheme of that, my frustration with that, when you run speed option into the boundary, you have to have a certain look. You'd already called timeout. So we'll go back and forth on that. Before we do, I'm curious, in all your years, was there a call or two where you just were like, man, to this day, I can close my eyes and go, I want that one back?
I don't know about to this day, but during the season and maybe a couple years after, we have those all the time. I mean, this thing's playing out in real time, and you got to make a call. And certainly in these pressure-packed situations, a 3rd down, a 4th down, game ending, and you got to go with it. And so, and you prepared for all week and all season and all that. So yes, there's all kinds of calls that you'd want back. I mean, I will tell you one that jumps to my mind that ties right into this conversation. And it's when we played Auburn back there in Georgia. We ran option on the goal line, got the ball batted down, turnover, and it's a close game and we lose. So, but let me tell you something when I saw that play being run and what happened, I just shook my head and said, man, oh man, for a way different reason than you did and most everybody else did. That was not a bad call. That was poor execution. They actually had the look, Brock. Now, it might have not been as clean as you love it, but they had it. I went back and looked at the tape. And so, but here's what I'm going to tell you. One of the hardest things to practice, and you know this, one of the hardest things to practice 100% is goal line and short yardage. Because you have to practice that live to really build skill and practice. And you're not going to do that at this time of year. You get a few pops of that in fall camp. But when you start in the season and you go to scouts and you go to service, quote, your 2s versus 1, it's very hard to say, cut this loose, we're going live here.
Okay. So you and I we're going to debate this a little bit. This is good. You and I are always so friendly with one another. Always so fun. So I'm going to debate this, and I'm going to go a couple different directions here. One of them is what I've learned sitting on the sidelines next to these coaches in real time with the USFL and the UFL and listening to these play calls. And Skip Holtz has won the last 3 championships. Yeah. And I think, Chris, one of the secret sauce the great ingredient is in the red zone, in goal line, 3rd downs. He never pigeonholes himself. Every play has options. It's amazing. He doesn't do a million things. In fact, he runs the fewest plays of anybody in those leagues. But when he gets down there, every play has options. Number 2, and I was just chatting with my nephew, Sam, about this a few weeks ago, Utah, about Andy Ludwig. He's like, man, you know what I love about this system? We got man or zone beaters. 3rd downs are so good. I've never been in a situation like this where there is always an answer. This isn't just a man beater. This isn't just a zone beater. We have options built into the play. Jed Fish early in the week compared the reverse last year on 4th down versus Wazoo to that call. And to me, they were entirely different. I thought that was totally unfair. That 4th down call to Roma Dunze had multiple options built into it. And that's why Kalen and Grubb loved it. If they give us this look, we can run the ball. If they give us this look, you can fake the run and you can give a little flip around to Rome because you have space. You run that speed option after a timeout into the boundary, Chris. I don't think there's enough options. And if they give you, and it's muddy at all, is it 1 guy outside? Is it 2 guys outside? It's dead with 2. And if they muddy those waters up at all, it just felt like way too many options could be dead on arrival. And it just, to me, did not give enough options to the quarterback.
Well, what option are we talking about? Like, you either have the look or not.
Yes, and you like the look? You thought on snap?
It was clean enough. Now, here's the one thing that I'm going to say. So the other thing I couldn't tell is when I went back to try to look at the tape is I didn't have the tape that showed the look when they called timeout. So they were looking, I know, for a pass. They didn't like that look. So I didn't see how they lined up there. Now, I'm assuming somebody looked and said, hey, if they give us the same look, the speed option has a chance. But now here's the thing, Brock. So we got game on the line here. And so here's the only thing that I can maybe side with you a little bit, even though you're not making this point, is that when game is on the line, the one thing that I'd really like to do is go to a grooved call. Mm-hmm. And grooved calls are calls that are in our core. They're in our DNA. We've run them 1,000 times. We know the looks, all those type of things. Because the pressure is huge at that time. And so those kids need to react and not think. There was obviously thinking going on in that look. I love option football. I love option zone read is option football.
Sure.
And you can add elements to it. So I love option football in third downs, fourth downs, even game on the line if it's part of your grooved package. And so you can make a case this is not a grooved call in your
package. Will Rogers running speed option into the boundary. That cannot be a grooved call.
So I get that. There probably hasn't been enough groove reps. Now, I'll tell you this. To me, when I watched the tape, the problem was they blocked it wrong. You got to leave. You got to hang one. You got to leave one man on the line of scrimmage. They blocked that, so now we got a problem right there. Now it's just turning into a quarterback sweep. But let's say that they did block it right, and they're going to hang one because the look is there that the tight end tackle can take the D end and scoop up to the backer who got involved too. The big problem too was the guard. The guard got beat. He got knocked back. That D tackle from Wazoo did a nice job of getting knockoff, pushing him back. So now it's soft on that side. So to me, that's where I went with the execution part of things.
I'm trying to remember this coach. Gosh darn it. I used to have a great memory about this stuff, Chris. There was a coach in a very big game. I think it was a Fiesta Bowl, a very prominent moment. And he was really second-guessing himself about the Statue of Liberty. Should we really run the Statue of Liberty? Should we really go for it in that moment? And if I was that coach, I would have had some fear too because there was no other option, right? There was like, this is either going to work or it's not. There's going to be no creating. There's going to be no, checks. There's going to be like, this is the call. And I know you had a little hesitation about it. And then you ultimately did what? You ultimately trusted your gut and the people around you who were like, hey, Chris, we have prepped for this, right? We have you call it grooved. Were you not grooved for that moment in time perfectly?
Yeah, I mean, let me say this. I mean, we had repped that thing a lot during the year. We had called it once. So we did have a decent amount of banked reps on it. But let me throw another one out with you. And I've always said this, like everybody loves to talk about that first Fiesta Bowl at Boise State that we won against Oklahoma. The one that I jump up and down about is the second one we won against TCU that we won 17 or 17 to 10, I think it was. Might have been 17-14. I can't remember. But that was two undefeated teams. TCU was darn good. They had Andy Dalton. I mean, they were good. Okay. So there was another play in there that we called in the fourth quarter that was a fake punt that we were trying to get repped all game long, and they kept pointing it out, and we finally made an adjustment on our punt formation, and we said, if they don't call this out when we make this adjustment, we're rolling with it. We roll with it. It's our punter throwing the ball to our wingback coming through the middle of the formation. Brock, he stood in there and took a shot like you would have, a quarterback, a pro quarterback in the day. And we executed it to a T to get about a 50-yard gain to go on and score. And I think about that being a groove call, game on the line. I mean, sometimes you got to it's better to be lucky than good. And I think about that, my mentality was listen, I think this gives us the best. We're not going for, we got to make something happen. And if this blows up on us, I know I'm going to look like the biggest monkey out there. But it is what it is. And we're not coming here to play a close second. And so sometimes you got to trust your gut. You got to go with what you think is the best thing. And that's part of the arena getting second guessed on Tuesday, Wednesday of the next week.
Okay, very last thing here. How do the Huskies flush that? All of the emotion of it, the rivalry of it. How can you put that behind you and now press ahead into Big Ten play, Northwestern at home, and then 3 or 4 out on the road? How does Jed get that group to flush that and press ahead?
The thing that I love so much, and again, this is going to go into coach talk and cliches, but I mean this. The thing that I love so much about sports is the number one thing it teaches you is resiliency and bounce back. It's teaching you that during the game, series after series. You know, I always say this, like the game is about 3 things. It's about momentum swings, it's about random events, and it's about adversity. That's going on. Those kind of like, it's a Venn diagram that kind of overlaps, and that's going on at all times. And whoever responds the best to those things, we got momentum. Can we keep the momentum? And, and then there's a random event. It's like, how did he just fumble that? Like the punter just dropped the ball. So that just happens. Yep. But it all kind of comes back to this adversity. Can we respond? And so it happens during the game. It happens after a hard loss. You got to shake this off. And I also think it goes back to, like, you're training from day one with your team. And I've just gotten on this for the last, I don't know, couple years and maybe the last year. Like, I've had a paradigm shift, and I think we've talked about this. I think the games are about learning. I think practice is about performance. You can't go to practice and practice poorly and practice crappy or put a play in, because what's going to happen if we do that? The coach, everybody's we're going to get beat here. Or you put a play in and you can't execute it, they're throwing it out. So you got to show up to build skill and perform in practice. Yep. Now we go to the game and we stress test that. We stress test what was going on. So that's what I think about this, like all the learning that just went on. Like, UW have been playing all these home games, these 2 home games against kind of inferior talent opponents. They go to an evenly matched deal, and they're on a road game. That offensive line can't handle the crowd, and they jump off sides. Okay, that's one thing we got. Like we are not ready for this.
Yep.
Our option game in critical situation, we're not ready for this. Assignment wise and whatever else. So there's a list of 10 things that he's got, I'm sure, on his docket that was like, we've got to clean this up, and then we're going to have a new list next week. And that's what we continually, and it's that evolution. And so I think if the mentality is like, what did we learn? We're back to work. This is it's a setback. It's not failure. It's a setback that we got to bounce forward.
Well, I'll leave you with this one, and I heard it, I think, last week, and I really, really liked it. And you know it, right? And you probably heard it before as well. The best teams respond and don't react.
Yeah.
You got to be 100%. Responders and not reactors. We're all reacting. All the armchair quarterbacks reacting to that final play. All of the reaction to that. The team can't. The coach can't. You've got to now respond and move forward.
Yeah. And that's been out there for a while, and that's what I think a real competitor does. That favorite line of, Mike Tyson's or whoever, everybody's got a plan until they get hit.
Yep.
I push back on that. Those MMA fighters, like real competitors, they know they're going to get hit.
Yes.
So we're preparing for that response, not like, oh my gosh, how did this random event happen? How did I get hit? How did I drop the ball? How do we just fumble? How do we get a safety in our own end zone? Like, those things happen. And so now it's our response to that. And so, again, those are nice little coaching cliches that every coach loves to throw out. But you better be working on that, pointing those out, putting your guys in those situations in practice so you can perform, and so it's second nature on Saturday.
Friday night, Illinois, Nebraska. Can't wait to see what the Fox wardrobe and makeup do.
That's really what it's all about.
Put you in the best place, man, responding to put you in the best place possible. Chris, you're the best, man. Thank you.
All right, Brock. Good talking to you, brother.